Hi, I'm Vijay Chittoor, co-founder and CEO of Blueshift. Blueshift is a platform for intelligent customer engagement, and our customers are B2C brands like a Lending Tree, BBC, Interactive Corp. And if you're a marketer of one of these companies, the challenge you have is that the amount of data your customers are leaving behind is 1,000 times more than they did 10 years ago. And the number of touch points you have with your customers in terms of channels is 10 times more, if not more than that, than it was 10, 15 years back. So how do you take all this data, translate that into intelligent customer engagement at all these touch points? That's what we help our customers do, and we saw this problem firsthand, the founding team of Blueshift. We saw this problem firsthand at companies like Walmart Labs, companies like Groupon, and that is why we built Blueshift to be an AI-driven platform that activates all of your customer data. And I'm excited to talk more about that with Al, who is one of our customers, and a really interesting person. I know we are standing between you and happy hour, but speaking with Al will be more than worth it, I can assure you. So let me actually have Al introduce himself, maybe tell us a little bit about you, Al the person, but also about your role as a marketing technologist at the Agora companies. What is the Agora companies, and sort of walk us through that a little bit.
Cool, thanks Vijay. Yeah, so I'm Al Yukna. I am Director of Marketing Technology and Research for the Agora companies. How many people here have heard of the Agora companies? Great. We're under the radar private company. We've been around for about 40 years. We're in the private media space. The Agora companies includes about 40 affiliate companies all over the world, again in private media, which is primarily subscription-based. I don't think it's a stretch to say most of our activities are inbound with commerce on the other side of those activities, so maybe not too dissimilar than a lot of folks in this room. Being a company of the size we are, we push out about 1.2 billion emails a month. A lot of that's lead gen, but a good amount of that is content that we put out. All of our affiliate companies are generally in the wealth, health management sectors, a lot of stock advice, retirement advice, and even travel, which is really our wheelhouse and what we were founded on. So a private media company, we support, really the way we look at it is our customers are our affiliate companies. The core of what I do is help the marketing technology stack to support all of those folks. And that is not without its challenges. Certainly the challenges are of scale. Logistics, I think, is another large piece. But we're really here today to talk about the marketing technology stack and what the pain points are for large organizations, small organizations, things of that nature. In my spare time, I coach Little League Baseball. That's one of my biggest passions.
That's great.
Also been a touring musician for 30 years now, which kind of dates me, but that's okay. So I like to get in, have a lot of fun. That's why I'm in the marketing space. I've been an engineer, data engineer for 25 years. Marketing always has great challenges, and certainly the theme of this entire conference, marketing technology and the customer data platform is a great challenge to tackle. So excited to be here today. To talk with Vijay is a great partner of ours, and we can certainly answer questions at any point during the conversation.
Very cool. I think what you said starts touching on the nature of the problem we are going to be talking about today. So I think you talked about the scale of engagement that you drive. You talked about 1 billion emails. You talked about paid media, you talked about a bunch of stuff, and you're also collecting, given the nature of your business as a subscription company, as a publisher, you're collecting a very diverse type of data. So talk to us a little bit about sort of how you think about the problem itself, because in some ways, like we mentioned, some of these brands are collecting more and more data about customers. You and I as consumers, we are interacting with every brand on digital, mobile, social. We are leaving behind so much more data than we did before. And the other thing that's kind of happening simultaneous with that is I think 10 years back, customer engagement or data activation might have been an email problem.
Yeah.
But now it's really like, I think what's happening is that you can think about many, many types of relationship marketing channels. I know you run into many of them.
Yep.
But paid media has become people addressable. Newer types of channels keep coming up over and over again over time, and they're all people addressable. So how do you think about sort of the problem itself, and what kind of data, what kind of channels are you thinking about when you build your stack?
I think the biggest issue we face is, I'm sure you've all seen the poster, maybe a lot of you have grabbed the poster, that shows the landscape of Martech as it's evolved, and today there's, I don't know, thousands of platforms
right.
addressing myriad channels. I mean, these are the majority of the channels that we're in, but it's many, many different marketing technology platforms addressing many, many different channels. I think the biggest issue is that we have information that we're gathering across those channels, and we're not getting a true view of what our customer is, what our customer is doing, and I think more importantly, what they are not doing in those spaces. So the challenge becomes, how do we pull together all of this different data across different avenues, different channels,
Yep.
Especially as channels emerge, everyone wants the latest channel. That's why we're at Marketing Technology, as a conference and as a theme. So the real meat of that challenge, and I think the meat of your question is, how do you pull that together?
Yeah.
How do you have a view of customer that makes the most sense? How are you able to pull in, I think, real and meaningful data, and then do actual strategic execution against that data? Because these things are all great, they're all very great shiny tools, your Twilios of the world, and certainly, Facebook as a platform, but what do you do with the information you glean, and how do you tackle that, I think, in a timely manner?
Right. Yeah, and I think if you think about it, you've been in Martech for more than a decade now, and if you think about sort of early days of Martech, paid media, you would not have thought of that as a people addressable channel.
Right.
I think when we were chatting earlier today, you talked about how WhatsApp and SMS are becoming very important to your international brands, and that would not have been a problem you might have seen like a few years back. So clearly there's a lot of dynamic stuff happening in this world. Looks like each of these channels is now coming up with a tool like a Twilio at some point, in your career. Did not exist as a company, but now sort of exists as a large public company. So how do you sort of think about reacting to that kind of change?
Well, number one, you need to be agile, and I think there was even a breakout today about agile marketing.
Yeah.
You have to be nimble. One of the biggest challenges is, it's not just for companies of our scale, it's companies of all sizes, if you're tied to monolithic systems,
right.
If you are with a vendor that says, this is what we have, this is what you use, you are not agile by definition.
Right.
And certainly my firm is not innocent either. That is what we strive for, is to deconstruct the monolith. You really have to find ways to work with many different vendors to build a stack. I don't think that one size fits all for the, hopefully there are no Adobe folks in the room, but the experience manager approach may work for very, very large brand organization and firms that can deal with that monolithic approach because they bought into the product, and it works throughout the life cycle for them. But I don't think that is necessarily the approach for small or even SMBs, and even in our case large enterprise applications, because it simply doesn't give you that flexibility.
Yeah.
And if you had said to me even a couple of years ago that outside of the US market that WhatsApp would have phenomenal growth for activation and
right.
and even content delivery, that would have taken me by surprise, but that's the reality of today.
That is exactly the reality of today. So clearly monolithic approaches do not work. Marketing cloud approaches kind of have their own challenges. So let's start talking about how do you deal with this problem, and let's start working our way kind of from the data all the way to the activation channels to figure out how do you construct the stack. So I think the first step has to be to even unify some of this data, and we call that like a full circle view of customers. Other people might say single customer view, 360-degree customer view. What does that mean to you? What has to go in to a customer view to make it more 360 than less, if you will.
Yep. I mean, I think the important thing is, and just for folks in the room, the reason that Vijay and I are talking today is we spent some time a couple of months ago getting philosophical about our approaches. We were already partners in business and working through some of those pieces with our organization, but we whiteboarded out what our vision is and how there are kind of layers or even trophic layers, if you will, about where our technology comes into play. And really what resonated for both of us between us was an aha moment. It was, well, we have the same approach. We understand at the base there are enterprise data components, which could be CRM, it could be ERP, it could be any of these core kind of data systems of record. But the next layer really is what is the view of the customer that's coming in, not only upwards from those core enterprise data objects, but what is feeding this layer on the Martech stack side. So view of customer, I think, is many things to many people.
Yep.
It could be as simple, and it's not a simple concept, as a CDP. It could be as complex as another view of record that feeds into a CDP and an activation layer and an attribution modeling layer. But I think that view of customer is informed by the enterprise system of record.
Yep.
And it is also interoperable in that it is feeding and also getting data, I think, from Martech touch points with consumers.
No, that's a great point. So I think the way I like to think about it is clearly at least two things are happening, maybe more. But one, I think customers are moving between different forms of identity, right? And we may know a little bit about them. They might be anonymous, or they might seem anonymous to us at some point in time. They might become known customers at other points in time. They might become mobile addressable customers at a different point in time. So managing that transition has to be part of the full circle view. Yeah. And I think the second more important thing which gets overlooked is really understanding, in the traditional sense, when companies thought about their data architecture, it mapped to their business reality. So if you think about sort of a hospitality company, every time I check in, there's like a transaction. It has a check-in date and check-out date at a hotel. The hotel itself is a property which has a location, and there's attributes around that. Now, how do I fold all of that richness of my business logic, which is transaction, which is catalog, into the customer object so as to make my customer engagement more intelligent? That has to happen in this full circle view.
Yeah, absolutely, because you want prescriptive, predictive marketing touch points, but without that work and that heavy lifting, it's not going to happen.
Without that heavy lifting, that does not happen. And you talked about prescriptive and predictive, so let's actually get into that a little bit, because now that if you have all this data, you have this full circle view. Obviously, you're talking about brands which have millions of customers, and you're not sitting there looking at the full circle view for each and every customer. So clearly, the use of that full circle view has to be to start doing a couple more things which lead to that activation. So the next layer over, I would think, is trying to gather that intelligence, trying to start understanding what the customer is likely to do or what the customer is likely to want. And that can be sort of the who, what, when, and where of marketing. The who being the audiences you want to target, the what being the recommendation you want to surface in front of them, the timing, the channels. So how do you think about that piece, and how do you think about sort of your own data scientists building that? How do you think about sort of bringing in tools which can help with this?
Well, I think this layer really is what's informing those touch points as far as what used to be A/B testing, ABY testing, kind of optimization of content and offer, has really been taken over by the broad stroke of AI. AI is everywhere, and whether it's a very long if-then statement or a switch statement, or it is actual AI, I think that's on the product level. But in this layer, this really is where we are doing that activation, that smart segmenting. That used to be, I think, a lot of toil, and especially for marketers having to do list management, segmentation, do lookalikes and the like. This is to replace that. This is to have systems that can do that for you.
And I think going back to sort of my own days, sort of in marketing at Walmart and Groupon, I think the challenge we saw in the space was You could always go to a data scientist and say, go build me a model to do X, Y, Z, but then oftentimes they don't have the full circle view of the customer, so it takes them a month to stitch together data from disparate sources, takes them a month to normalize the data, takes them another month to extract features before they even start building out these models. And even when they've built it out, it's still not informing a customer experience. So really there are a lot of challenges in this space which are linked to that data not being unified, the data not being normalized on tap, and really linking these systems as a full circle view on the predictive systems seems to have a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing to mention is we've thrown around the term data scientist.
Right.
I think a lot of firms don't have the funds to hire a bunch of data scientists. And 5, 6, 7 years ago, this was only available to firms that could hire data scientists.
That's a great point.
To do that work, and we've seen a lot in the AI space, again, whether it's AI or it's just a really well thought out algorithm. You're seeing that work in SaaS platforms by and large, where you or I or anyone in this room could go out and start a contract with Data Robot or Azure or the Watson folks that are maybe a couple beers deep right now.
Right.
But that is bringing that technology to the people. It's bringing it to the SMB market and below, based on cost volume and computation time. So I think this layer was unachievable, and I'm pointing to my version here, but this layer was unachievable 5, 6, 7 years ago, but now it is available, sometimes inherent in platforms or leasable, and it can be utilized. It used to be a scary thing to have AI make decisions for you, but it really does cut down the toil and make those intelligent activation decisions.
Right. So yes, so step one, clearly unify the data, have a persistent identity, bring all the different data objects into the customer object, so that's the full circle view. Step two is derive predictive intelligence, but that still doesn't quite solve the problem we started talking about. We started talking about how to make each and every decision point sort of informed by that data. So what you really need after that is also some notion of decisioning. And when we think about decisioning and we talk about all these different channels, some of these channels have different types of decisioning that you need to do. For example, if you're thinking about sending an email, that's at a point in time. Now that point in time might be depending on the customer's behavior, but it's always about sending Al an email at a certain time, maybe sending Vijay an email at a different time. So that's a point in time. But when you think about advertising, much as I would like, I really cannot say, let me go find Al on Facebook and advertise to him at 8 a.m. in the morning, because you might not even be there. So we start thinking about windows of time, how do you sort of maintain audiences which are available for advertising. And when you think about channels which are more around chat, which are more around website engagement, they have a different characteristic in terms of time. The customer is almost pulling that information out of you instead of you pushing it to them. So really, I think when you think about that decisioning, think about sort of like the different kind of decisioning systems that you need and how they all work together with this intelligence and with this full view of data.
Yeah, I think the biggest change that's come in our world is what was crazy expensive a few years, storing mass data objects to create these views. That cost has come down relative, and the computation cost to be able to do that work for us has come down. To be able to do, we used to be in the kind of batch and blast world where we'd have to segment, and it was all pushed, and we had no way to understand what right screen at right time, right audience meant. Now we're able to get that feedback through these systems, through the Martech as it touches folks as they engage with our content. But the ability to have that all crunched data-wise and have data stored for us, that's been the big revelation in the space.
Right.
And without that, we're not going to have any sort of semblance of this layer of decisioning, because we're constantly getting feedback from our consumers, so they don't necessarily have to tell us, well, I want this at 8 o'clock.
That's exactly right, yeah.
We're able to ingest that information. And for us, it's utilizing other partners we have in the space, such as folks at Linux and some other folks that really help drive the storage and components of that to interact with our systems, such as Blueshift and other folks. But it's a lot of computational power, but it's an exceptionally large piece of this puzzle to understand what decisioning means. It means saving time. Marketers can do more work. They can do more marketing. They can be more strategic. And it's a piece I think that's missing in the conversation stack with a lot of firms when they look at, well, what can I have? I can have faster, cheaper, more accurate, better value. It has to be part of that discussion.
No, that's absolutely right. I think what you said about batch and blast and sort of how the paradigm of decision making has changed. In some sense, the batch and blast was kind of saying, look, I'll throw up my hands. I really cannot decide at an individual level. So let me kind of make that, dumb all the decisions down to one decision, which says send the same email to 1 billion people at 8 a.m. in the morning, right? Yep. And really, I think obviously what the customer is expecting is that each person's email is different, the timing is different. So really the decision paradigm that marketers and brands have embraced is about making millions of these decisions at different points in time across different channels with the right content. And that's a pretty big shift for many organizations.
Yeah, I think it's, you're getting feedback from your consumer, you're getting feedback from a potential consumer, but you can't treat them as all or nothing. It's not a lead versus a customer.
Yes.
And you see that certainly in monolithic systems, the CRMs of yore, that's the classification you had. And
yep.
If you wanted to dive deeper, you needed to come up with your own tagging and kind of list segmentation pieces. But the notion that we're able to get feedback from consumers or potential consumers and have that decisioning done for us in real time, again, relatively inexpensively, and it wasn't achievable 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
That is a huge paradigm shift, and I love the word paradigm shift or phrase in that context.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. We have to understand that it's both ways, much in the way that social media marketing kind of exploded on the scene as I'm able to get input, I'm able to have a conversation. I think that's the way to look at this type of exercise. It may not be a direct conversation, though it could be with bots and what have you, if you activate that way, but it is information we're getting from the customer about their preferences just simply as they interact with our offerings.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And another paradigm shift as we talk about this vision, which obviously is your vision for digital experiences, one thing that often gets lost is this vision is actually very customer-centric because now we are talking about bringing, if you look at the center of the picture, it's all about the customer, it's not about the channel, right? And the old way of doing things was saying, look, I'll build buy like an email system, right? And I'll buy like a paid media system. And they would all have their own decisioning, they would all have their own lightweight data. And what has happened now in terms of as we are talking about paradigm shift, the other paradigm shift that has happened is that you have very programmatic, thin layers of delivery on each channel. I know you guys are partners with Spark Post, which is the last mile of your email, and you have other partners like that across many other channels. So as that has happened, obviously this architecture allows you to put the customer at the center. So how do you think about that shifting your strategy, your paradigm, and how you think about the organization around you at large?
It's a great point. What we strive to do at Agora is to create really a digital experience platform, which isn't different than Adobe or Salesforce. You have offerings and technologies that, for us, it's been horizontal. We're trying to squash it into a vertical stack. Again, that's one of the themes, of the conference is creating a marketing stack. But at the end of the day, we want a smooth and seamless customer experience. That top layer is customer experience. The customer doesn't know about the other layers. But in the past, you're absolutely right, those systems were all different. They were informed differently, they had different strategies, and sometimes it's different operational groups that were running the different segments. The social media team did activities here, the email marketing team did this, and poor old IT, no one ever talked to IT, so they didn't
Right.
get to have didn't get to have a seat at the table. And for us organizationally, it's looking from the top down and having those conversations to make sure that the enterprise is aware of all these activities so that we can really make data-driven decisions. So before it was a lot of toil in each of those segments, and this is what is the best customer experience, and what is, for us, what is the best way to have our marketers interact with our technology so they can do more marketing.
No, that's a great point. And I think the other thing, based on what you said, is if you think about this picture with the customer at the center and the channels being somewhat lightweight, it also, and going back to what you were talking about, as not thinking about the customer as a lead or a customer or whatnot, it also disrupts the paradigm of acquisition versus retention, where people thought about, paid media is all acquisition, email is all retention, and now if I look at how you're deploying these channels, you might actually be using people data on Facebook and custom audiences, and that's a paid media channel, but now you're using people data, which is based on first-party audiences, customers who have already been quote-unquote acquired in some form. So that's another kind of big shift in the mindset as you go towards the stack.
Yeah, it's about iteration, and I know there was a talk earlier about agile marketing. I think that is the esprit de corps of agile marketing. It is to constantly iterate. You should not be tied to any one channel. Your journeys for your customer experience should not be single channel. It should not be even single resolution point. There should be many different journeys that customer could take. Of course, the end result for at least for our firm is commerce, is the result of marketing, and a good amount of that is inbound. But you're absolutely right. It has to. You have to iterate. You have to be nimble enough to be agile. You cannot be tied into one channel in particular.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that shift is what enables someone like you to create a strategy where the customer data hub of sorts, the customer data activation platform, as we are calling it, really send out 1.2 billion emails a month, as you call it. Obviously, it's being sent out through a partner like SparkPost on the last mile, but to think of that scale driven by customer data rather than being driven by the channel,
Yep.
That's a dramatic shift in how companies are operating. And maybe that leads me to another related question. So you mentioned that Agora companies is really 40 brands, and from what I understand, some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, different ones that are at different points in the maturity curve in terms of how they think about marketing, how their technology stack has evolved. So as you sort of guide this discipline, this thinking across these 40 brands, and this might be of interest to the audience here, because different people might be saying, I love this, but where do I get started? Do I need to do all of this on day one? Can I get started with pieces of this? How do you guide this room, and how do you guide sort of your brands to think about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We have some of our affiliate companies are much more robust.
Yep.
They have much more firepower. But each of our affiliate companies are idea driven. They are driven by publishers and writers. So that is its own challenge. Some are larger, some are very small. They have to behave in the same manner.
Right.
And we offer at the core, our enterprise offering is really going towards a model very, very, very similar there, so that marketers have the same tools available to them. But some have a much greater depth technically.
Yep.
But at the very core of that is, I think, the takeaway from today, I think for folks in the room, is if you want to start somewhere, it is to start with having an opinion about where your customer data lives and how you are looking at that customer data. And I would caution to say that it doesn't mean a CRM. I think a CRM is storing objects that have happened. Customer data platforms, and customer activation platforms are storing data that you can work with in real time. And if I was to sit down and carve out a budget, that's where I would look. There are many vendors in the space. You may want a vendor such as Blueshift that can do all of that and push out in various channels such as SMS and email and other channels. But that is where I would focus my, first to build. I would look at this layer and really say, how do I inform this layer so that I can sit down and be more strategic in my decisions as I build out my marketing stack. And that should really flow where you see your customers.
No, that's a great way to put it. I think so in some ways, everyone in this room, all of your brands have to invest in some customer data infrastructure solution, right? And that might have different levels of maturity. All of them have to invest in some customer data activation platform, which may be a subset of the functionalities we are outlining here on day one and might evolve to cover the full functionality over time. And they will have to invest in these lightweight execution applications on different channels. Again, the needs of that might depend, might change over time. You might today say that my biggest problem is email and Facebook, and tomorrow suddenly WhatsApp starts becoming important because of international. Maybe you introduce a chatbot. I think I'm seeing a lot of banks, for example, start introducing chatbots in their customer experience. And obviously, I'm a customer of Bank of America. They introduced something called Erica recently. Now that's another touch point that can become smarter with customer data. So over time, the needs might change, but to your point, having that consistent view of the stack, having a point of view on where it's going, investing in solutions that are flexible and future-proof in some sense seems to be the way to go.
It's where I would concentrate.
That's great, yeah. So with that, maybe I'll open it up to the audience to see if we can take one or two questions. I know we are coming to the end of time, but we could certainly take one or two questions. I see a hand going up there.
We're in injury time, it looks like.
Right.
Hi, I just want to say thank you both. I feel like this chart and your discussion today has helped me as a marketer to define my needs. I've been feeling like this is what I need, but I don't necessarily have the framework in which to communicate that to vendors as we're building out our Martech stack. So thank you for that. So Vijay, you talked a lot about today, right?
Yeah.
This paradigm shift. And so how does now, with these type of tools in our Martech stack, how does that change the marketer's day-to-day roles and responsibilities? What does that look like for us, and how do the solutions, the technology that we're using, the vendors, what is the responsibility to kind of help guide marketers through this shift and supporting them and training them to actually do the day-to-day execution on this platform?
No, that's a great question. I think along with every paradigm shift, there's a change in tools, but there's also a change in processes and approaches and people's time in some sense, right? And the way I think about it, marketers at the heart of it are storytellers and brand strategists, and they're great at understanding where the brand needs to go, where the customer engagement needs to go. And solution providers can help with that, but obviously it's finally up to the brand. But I think this paradigm shift ultimately will enable marketers to become more of that, better storytellers. Because finally, I think the last round of automation in some ways made marketers sort of force them to become ops people more and more, and made them button clickers more than the strategists and the creative folks. And I feel for once, I think having a paradigm like this finally puts marketers back in charge of the strategy, back in charge of the creative, back in charge of the customer experience, because finally it's easier for all of us to think about the customer than to think about channel and the semantics of that channel, if you will, right? And but that being said, I think it does require training. It does require guidance, which obviously the market there's pull. I think marketers like yourselves are driving that demand, and I think solution vendors like ourselves have a role to play in educating the market. We, on our side, when we think about building our own organization, we have a fantastic customer success team which helps with education, but we also brought on board, for example, a CMO or a Chief Growth Officer who was our customer at LendingTree. He was a VP of marketing and was a power user and really helped a big brand like LendingTree drive this transformation. And now he's kind of said, this is super exciting. I want to actually help the rest of the world learn from that. So we are obviously staffing up capabilities like that. We have built an academy which is open to our customers, and that's another great way to sort of start thinking through this. But definitely there is excitement. I think this is the right way to enable marketers to become true marketers. At the same time, it does require some training and investments which we have to make, but then there will be natural education in the market. But I'll let Al weigh in on that as well.
I would say quickly, work with vendors and marketing platforms that have an opinion. It's not just, I'm at the top, use my tool, it'll do all these magical things for you. I would challenge them and say, what's your opinion on a CDP? If it's not a CDP vendor, where do you fit into this stack? That's what I would challenge them, because you want marketers to be able to do more marketing at the end of the day. That's what you want to do. You don't want to be a production person. You want to make data-driven decisions.
Perfect. So I think with that, let's let everyone head back to happy hour. I know you and I could hang around for a few minutes to take more questions from the audience. But this has been great. I enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you.